Good evening. Welcome to the March 11th, 2025 Bellevue City Council meeting. I don't have my little blurb about, but I guess maybe I don't have to say it tonight, so I'm just going to move on. Could we have a roll call, please?
Thank you, Mayor Robinson.
Yes, here.
Deputy Mayor Malakuti.
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Lee. I can verify that Councilmember Lee is online, but he is currently talking to our IT folks. Councilmember Neuenhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn.
Councilmember Hamilton, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Sure. Please stand if you're able. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we have a proclamation tonight. It's Day of Nowruz, and Deputy Mayor Malakutian will be reading it, and Afshin Separi will be receiving it. And if he wants to come sit at the microphone now, he can. There you are. Welcome. So go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Nowruz, which in Persian means New Day, is an ancestral festivity based on the solar calendar, marking the first day of spring and symbolizing nature's renewal, celebrated on the vernal equinox in the northern hemisphere. And Nowruz is celebrated as a central secular holiday by more than 300 million people around the world, by a wide array of ethnic and cultural groups, including but not limited to Afghan, Azerbaijani, Baluchi, Chechen, Hazara, Kazakh, Kurdish, Kyrgyz, Lezgin, Pashto, Iranian, Tatar, Tajik, Turkmen, Uyghur, and Uzbek peoples, each bringing their unique customs and traditions to these joyful occasions. And Nowruz, celebrated through centuries-old traditions, symbolizes a time of personal renewal in harmony with nature and an opportunity to come together in community. And Bellevue is home to many people who celebrate Nowruz, who are valuable members of our community, making significant contributions to our city's cultural diversity, economy, and society. And as a holiday that reflects on leaving behind the challenges of the past year while embracing hope for the future, the spirit of Nowruz continues to inspire us to foster compassion, unity, and peace. Now, therefore, I, Mo Malakutian, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of Bellevue, Washington, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim March 20, 2025 as Day of Nowruz in Bellevue, and encourage all members of our community to celebrate Nowruz by attending local events and exploring the diverse cultures that enrich our city.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So Afshin Separi is co-founder and former president of Alefba Group, a community-based Iranian organization in Bellevue, and coordinator of the Nowruz meet and greet event at City Hall coming on Saturday, March 22nd. Welcome.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Mayor and Deputy Mayor, esteemed City Council members, distinguished guests, and friends. It's an honor to be here with you once again as we celebrate Nowruz, the Persian New Year. On behalf of Alefba Group, an Iranian cultural nonprofit in Bellevue, I sincerely thank the City Council for recognizing this cherished tradition. Nowruz, meaning New Day, is more than a New Year's celebration. It embodies renewal, hope, and unity. While its origins may be tied to Zoroastrian traditions, for most of its 3,000-year history, Nowruz has transcended national and religious boundaries. Today, over 300 million people across Iran, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, in Western and Central Asia the Caucasus, and beyond celebrate this festival as a symbol of shared humanity. Bellevue's recognition of Nowruz highlights the diversity of our city and the contributions of the communities celebrating Nowruz. This proclamation affirms our commitment to inclusivity and cultural appreciation. Thanks to the City of Bellevue's generous support, we are honored to host our Nowruz meet and greet event at City Hall on Saturday, March 22nd from 5 to 7 p.m. I warmly invite the City Council and all citizens of Bellevue and Washington State to join us in this joyous celebration. Other Nowruz celebrations will also take place across Western Washington, including an event at Seattle City Hall on Sunday, March 23rd. We encourage everyone to take part in these festivities. Alpha Group and other Iranian organizations work to foster cultural understanding and strengthen community bonds. Through Nowruz and other events, we celebrate diversity and shared traditions. As we enter the new year, let Nowruz remind us of our commitment to peace, unity, and prosperity. Our strength lies in our diversity. I extend my deepest thanks to the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council for this recognition and for hosting us at City Hall. And to all of you, thank you for your support and friendship. Wishing you all a joyous Nowruz and year of health, happiness, and success. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's do a picture. Anybody who'd like to be in the picture, please join us. Okay. Next, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second?
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. City Clerk, do we have anyone signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This evening, there are 3 pre-registered speakers on the list. So before I start calling names, I'll go over a few of the rules that the council has in place. So the total time for oral communications is for a period not to exceed 30 minutes, and all topics must relate to City of Bellevue government. People speaking to items on tonight's agenda will be called first, and then if time remains, people speaking to items not on tonight's agenda will be called. The presiding officer in both of those categories is authorized to give preference to those who have not spoken to council within the last 60 days or who will be speaking to items that will come in front of the council within the next 60 days. Each speaker will be allowed to speak up to 3 minutes, and only 3 speakers are allowed to speak to any one side of a particular topic. And with that, I'll call our first speaker, who is John Carlson.
Thank you very much. And the clock is ticking. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the council, thank you very much for hearing me out on this issue. I'm speaking in favor of Councilmember Neuenhouse's proposed ordinance to have a 30-day mandatory minimum for repeat violators of shoplifting and car prowling statutes. A long time ago, way back in the 90s, I was the co-author and leader of a ballot initiative that became America's first 3 strikes you're out statute. If you were convicted of 3 serious felonies, murder, rape, armed robbery, serious assault, you could find yourself facing a mandatory life term. It passed with 76% of the vote, and violent crime plummeted 40% within 2 years of its passage, then went down even further and stayed low for about 25 years. That initiative has 2 things in common with Councilmember Neuenhouse's proposed ordinance, and one huge difference. First, when it comes to crime, violent or property crime, a lot of it is committed by a small subset of the criminal population. Again, a subset of the criminal population. serial offenders, career criminals. They do it for a living. They like it. If you want to get serious about crime, target repeat offenders. The second is, frankly, not that many people really struck out under 3 strikes. Maybe 25 a year at first across the entire state, and then it tapered off because the word got out. And the real effectiveness of 3 strikes was that people with 1 strike or 2 strikes didn't want to get a third. Well, a deterrent can work. Reasonable, measured deterrent. The big difference, of course, between 3 strikes and Councilmember Neuenhouse's proposal is that if you struck out, you went to prison forever with rare exceptions. Under this ordinance, it simply says after a 3rd conviction for shoplifting or car prowl, you would receive a 30-day sentence. We're talking about adults who are caught shoplifting, they get a break, then they go out and do it again, and they get another break, and they go out and do it a 3rd time, and at that point, they're not getting the message. This proposed ordinance is the message. Time for a time out. It's measured, it's reasonable, and it will be effective. I hope you'll give it every consideration. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Patrick Bannon, and I believe Pearl would like to come up with Patrick. Drew? Okay, Pearl Lung is coming up as well.
Good evening. Yes, we have separate comments, but we're speaking to the same topic. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, members of the council, all of the city staff. My name is Patrick Bannon. I'm president and CEO of the Bellevue Downtown Association, and I'm joined by Pearl Lung, who is a senior manager for public policy for Amazon. And we are here tonight to express our strong support for the Grand Connection and on behalf of the Friends of the Grand Connection. And importantly, I'd like to acknowledge other Friends of the Grand Connection who are behind me, if they could raise their hand. So our support is specifically for this 30% design, the go-forward design that you'll hear about later this evening, and the staff's recommendation to pursue a general contractor, construction manager approach, a GCCM approach. As you'll remember, the Friends of the Grand Connection came together about 2 years ago, specifically to support the crossing project, and our role is to serve as advocates and also as partners with the city in identifying and securing funding for the project. We now have 42 steering committee members, and our members continue to grow, which is a strong indication of the broad support for the project. And you can see the full list of our steering committee members at friendsofthegrandconnection.org. Actually, it's friendsofgrandconnection.org. And another quick update, in the pursuit of our funding strategy in partnership with the city, we've established 4 committees to help work on various aspects, including developing interactive installations on both sides of the crossing where the public and potential donors can learn more about the project. And recently, members of the Friends of the Grand Connection had a very productive and inspiring workshop with Campbell and Company, your fundraising consultants for the project. And bottom line, momentum is growing, and we're excited for all that is ahead. Pearl.
Thank you, Patrick. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, and members of the City Council. We also want to make sure that we take a moment to compliment both the city staff and WSP team for their work on refining the 30% design. We want to make sure that this project continues to be grand and remains doable. That's what the Friends group like to say, memorable and doable. And we think the Go Forward design achieves that while accomplishing our objectives for the project, including economic development, placemaking opportunities, a linear park, and a safe mode split crossing for walkers, rollers, and strollers. And keeping an all-in budget of 150 to 200 million will be key to getting this crossing vision realized. Just as the High Line was for New York, the Grand Connection crossing will be transformative for Bellevue as it connects downtown to City Hall Plaza to East Trail. We see this crossing driving the development in the newly upzoned Wilburton area. It will provide new community gathering and placemaking opportunities. We are excited about how the crossing integrates with city-owned sites and the private development on either side of the crossing, and how this all supports a vision for a new crossing district in Bellevue, one that is linked with a safe and comfortable crossing for pedestrians and cyclists who want to come downtown from East Trail and vice versa. And to quote our fellow steering committee member, Steve Kramer, there is nothing like this crossing project anywhere in the region. It will truly be grand. So we ask you to continue to move the Grand Connection Crossing project forward tonight, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you and the city to make this transformative vision a reality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We did have one additional pre-registered speaker, and that's Joe Kunzler, who is joining us virtually. Mr. Kunzler, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Joe Kunzler here. I'm going to ask the City of Bellevue placed on the agenda, extending your exclusion policy to at least 1 year at a time, if not 3 years at a time. I received a joyful news today that Alex Zimmerman has been banned from the Puget Sound Regional Council for not 1, not 2, but 3 years. In part because of his attacks on and Mayor Wynn Robinson. And I just heard Mr. Zimmerman give an outburst. I will say that very seriously that I think we are at a critical time in our history as a region in standing up against hate. I know we'll be tested at the University of Washington this Thursday morning at the Board of Regents. I know we are being tested all over, but we are winning. We're winning because of the leadership of this mayor. We're winning because of the leadership of the PSRC. We're winning, obviously, because of the golden age of the Vanessa Kurtzer presidency over Redmond. Sadly, there's one community that just doesn't seem to want to play ball, get the memo, be a team player, and that's Kirkland. And I hope you'll consider tariffs and other retaliatory measures as you see fit to bring them in the line to put a stop to Zimmerman's attacks on all of us. Because when someone abuses public comment, it starts going after a particular group to going after all of us. And they're also endangering the future of public comment, which is so important to us in a democracy in between elections. I will also point out kindly that I don't see a timer on my Zoom screen. So please feel free to tap the table or clear your throat when it's 3 minutes. But I really would encourage the City of Bellevue to please look at your exclusion policies and consider the most extreme cases to, like Mr. Zimmerman, so keep coming and attacking, make the maximum sentence a year, or in the case of Redmond, half a year. Thank you for your public service and attention to this air defense emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the end of our pre-registered list tonight, but we do still have a few minutes left. So I'd ask at this point if there's anyone joining us who would like to speak to the council, please come forward. If you could state your name before you start speaking. Thank you.
Hello, Council. My name is Scott Aldrich. I'm a member of Livable Kirkland, Eastside Urbanism, and LD48 Democrats Executive Board. I wanted to express I can't speak for any of those organizations, obviously, but I would like to express my personal support of the Grand Connection and any project, really, that builds more housing. We have a huge deficit in the region of housing, and anything that can be done, any project that builds additional housing, and in particular density around our rail corridors and our bus corridors, should be prioritized. It really has gotten to the point where it is the good that is constraining the entire economy. Every service cost, every the transportation time to get to work, and therefore all the other things. It's taken much the same role that energy costs do in economies in different positions. So that's pretty much it. If you could please support any project that builds housing, and if you could build more housing in that housing, that would be great as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional folks joining us who would like to speak? Okay, please come forward. I will mention, roughly, we've had 3 people in support of the Grand Connection, so no comments about that.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor Robinson, and esteemed City Council. I wanted to share my utmost gratitude for the proclamation you passed for celebrating the Day of Nowruz on March 20th. In the second part of the proclamation, it would have been really easy to gloss over all the ethnic groups that celebrate this holiday, but you went above and beyond to include these ethnic groups. And in all parts of the U.S. where there's so many Kurds and Uzbekis, there's not even proclamations like this passed. And I think there's like maybe a few of us in Bellevue here, and you went out of your way to include us. And I think that really speaks to the city that Bellevue is. And I wanted to provide my utmost gratitude again, and thank you for your leadership.
You did not. If you could just.
My name is Marian Breyer, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I don't see an, okay, one more. Thank you. Again, if you could just state your name first. Thank you.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Alicia Shemwell, and I've been the director of the Bellevue Collection for the last 6 years. And I'm here tonight to express my support for the proposed ordinance to reduce public disorder crimes in Bellevue. As I've been working with my retailers for the last 7 years, the biggest issue we face is organized retail crime. And that is with groups of people, a lot of repeat offenders or people with drug addictions that are coming, and they're creating a safety issue for our employees and our customers. And there's many things that happen. What we find is that they have this vision that Bellevue is part of the greater Seattle, so the lack of rules that happen over there happen here, and they test us. We also find that a lot of times they're associated with gangs or other, bad activity, and with that, just one day it could happen here where we become another city where they've decided to take it further than they have yet. So I ask you and urge you to support it. Thank you.
Okay. I don't believe I see any more hands in it. Oh, okay. I take that back. I have one hand online. Ms. Geller, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay, if you could state your full name for the record, please. Thank you.
My name is Leslie Geller, and I think I'm the 3rd person, but if I'm the 4th to speak in favor of our version of 3 strikes, you're out. The first gentleman who spoke, I support all of his comments, and I definitely support this initiative. Thanks.
Thank you. That was our 3rd speaker on mandatory minimums, and we have had 3 on Grand Connection. Anyone else like to speak to the council tonight? Okay, I don't see any additional hands. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. So I see a lot of community participation tonight, which I so appreciate, everybody coming down here. I'm so sorry to tell you that we're going to go into executive session for 45 minutes, but I think Alcho might be open across the street. So if you would like to rejoin us in 45 minutes, you can do that. So pursuant to RCW 4230, blah, 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 we're going to go into executive session to evaluate the qualifications of candidates for appointment to elective office. The session will be approximately 45 minutes long, and then we will return to the regular meeting at the conclusion of our session. So we will see you in about 45 minutes. Back in session. Thank you for your patience. So I just wanted to give a little history here. We have an open seat on the council right now that is going to be open starting, I think, March 28th. Is that right, City Manager?
Yes, that is correct, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Because Councilmember Zahn was promoted to Representative Zahn at the state level, And her last meeting will be the week of March 28th, and that creates an open seat and gives us an opportunity to appoint somebody to fill that seat until the end of the year, when somebody is elected in November to continue in that seat for the next, through the term, through 2026, to complete Councilmember Zahn's term. So the person appointed can also run for the seat in November, but anybody can run for the seat in November. So having said that, we were all very just overwhelmed with the quality of applicants and the amount of applicants. We had 20 solid people from the community who stepped up and filled out the forms, wrote letters, explained to us their vision for Bellevue, their values, their priorities, and it was really just heartwarming to see so much passion for the city and such a commitment to the city, and so appreciate everybody who submitted an application. We narrowed it down to 5, which was not easy at all. And so I'd like to ask the deputy mayor to make a motion for the people that we are going to move on to the interview process.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to direct staff to invite the following candidates to interview during the regular council meeting next Tuesday, March 18. Jaskaran Singh Saro, Claire Somadweria, Diala Ezzeddin, Eric De River, and Vishal Bhargava.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So congratulations to those, and thank you to everybody who applied. Those are the 5 who are moving on to an interview. We will ask the staff to reach out to the other candidates, please, and let them know. And there will be 4 interview questions that we will be asking in the interview phase. And I think, City Clerk, you have a slide that shows these 4 interview questions. So this is what we will be asking the candidates. And I think that's all we need to talk about. Did I miss anything?
Do you want me to cover the format of the interviews?
Yes, why don't you do that? Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Mayor. The format for the interviews will be a 3-minute opening statement. So each candidate will be allowed up to 3 minutes to make their opening statement, and then 3 minutes to answer each of the 4 questions. So that is a total of 15 minutes with the 4 questions. I will draw names for a random selection of the order next week.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So next order of business is a consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we have 2 study session items tonight. City Manager, would you like to introduce them, please?
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. As you all know, one of the next big advancements for the Grand Connection vision is making the connection across I-405 from City Hall Plaza to East Rail. And the city's been working on this project with the community and stakeholders on the crossing for several years. We have members of our staff team who've been leading the work here at the table tonight to share the broad components of a proposed go-forward scope. And are looking for some feedback from the council on this. They're also seeking direction to begin preparing contracts for an alternative delivery approach, aligning the project's scope and budget. So we have from our Community Development Department, Jesse Canedo, our Chief Economic Development Officer, Anthony Gill, and from Transportation, Maher Walahi, and he's the Assistant Director of Capital Projects. With that, I'll turn it over to Jesse.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council. Tonight is a very important night as we consider moving into the next phase of implementation for the Grand Connection vision. Looking backwards, it's incredible how far we've come in the 30 months since we started the first ever engineering design on the crossing. Since Q4, we've had a lot of conversations about the visionary bridge that we brought to you at the end of the year, and a lot of conversations about what is important for day one. For the first day when we cut that ribbon, what is the experience? I think the vision has also become bolder as we clarify what experience the bridge is delivering and what the adjacent redevelopments will deliver. So that vision for Bellevue is getting bolder. Tonight, we are asking you to consider directing staff to move forward with preparing all of the contracts to move into the next phase of Grand Connection work aligned with the proposed scope and budget. Our agenda tonight will cover some non-crossing updates for the 2/3 of the Grand Connection that is west of the crossing, talk about the budget and scope adjustments and the delivery method, give you a brief update on the funding work, and then, as always, give you a look at the next steps. First, we're going to start with an update on a new community-focused program that is made possible by the council's budget support in this biennium.
So one of the things that's a big focus for us this year is the development of the audience for the Grand Connection and for the crossing, in this case through public programming. So we're really excited to be launching a grant program in the next several weeks focused on small and medium-sized programs and activations. We'll be providing $2,500 to $10,000 grants on a first-come, first-served basis to support small programs like farmers markets, live music, or even something like the India Day celebration, which you see on screen here. And this program will be focused on the Grand Connection corridor, but the council allocation will allow us to support activations and programs in other mixed-use areas across the city as well. So we're very excited to be moving this work forward.
And in other parts of the work on the crossing, we are, as we pull back a little bit on the spending for the structure itself to make sure we meet our budget goals for the crossing, we're ramping up other work on Memorable. So we have contracted with an artist, Matthew Mizzota, who will be leading our work to develop an arts plan, a public art plan for the crossing. That artist has an extensive list of fantastic pieces. If you've visited the Tampa airport recently, you may have seen one of his works. It is a floor-to-ceiling flamingo. So very much in line with Florida and the native environment there, but it's a very loved piece in Florida. You can kind of take a selfie getting pecked by the flamingo. So he'll be bringing that kind of creativity to the crossing, and we hope that will help us create memorable artwork for our future users. We are also continuing work to analyze the future redevelopment opportunities for the two city-owned parcels, the Metro site and the Lincoln Center site. We are advancing some work on the concept of that 18-hour district that surrounds and is connected by the crossing, and looking at some really exciting uses for that. We will bring more information back in the future. And then, of course, we all know that FIFA is coming to the county next year with 750,000 visitors to King County, and we are doing some work to clean up the route between City Hall Plaza and Bellevue Way to make sure it is tidy and exciting and memorable for all of those visitors who will be staying in Bellevue, and hopefully entice more of them to cross the lake and visit all of our wonderful small businesses and restaurants. Kind of giving a high-level summary of some of the next parts of the conversation. As I mentioned, we started this work in Q4 of 2023, so about 30 months ago, and we are really excited to be on time with the work. We are also looking at the alternative delivery methods to make sure we meet the timeline and help us assure constructability earlier so that we meet our budget goals. Of course, as we know in the news, there are some national and state ecosystem issues. We are concerned about some of the items around tariffs and material costs, migration and labor shortages. Those are items that are largely outside of the project's control, but we are monitoring them to make sure that we can adapt the project and the delivery approaches as those issues continue to evolve. So with that, I will hand it over to Anthony to talk about our timeline.
Yeah, so here's a look at where we've been thus far and some of the touch points that we've had with you all, with council, in the past year or so. So we launched the Grand Connection Crossing 30% design work with council on March 18th of last year, about a year ago, with an update on public space management and our proposed public outreach approach. In July, we returned with a summary of our findings from early public outreach and our in-person open house. And then in October, we shared a status report on the 30% design work. That's where we shared the first visuals of that visionary crossing approach. In December, we joined council for a walking tour and the kickoff with to the state legislative session with key legislators. And then we're back here tonight providing an update on the refined 30% design scope and a look ahead at some of the work to come this year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maher.
Thank you, Anthony. Both Anthony and Jesse mentioned about the milestone and project on time. So we were really happy to complete the 30% design late last year and early this year. And what's neat about the design is really based on a robust community input, and that include number of options and amenities. And speaking of the robust community input, that was included 3 open houses, more than 27 community meetings, where we gather information to develop that design. So in addition to completing the 30% design, we started looking at options and alternative to further refine the design to bring that back the project was in manageable budget. Next. So some of these refinement element included focusing, as Jesse mentioned, on day one use and not to preclude any future enhancement and integration. Consider the future of adjacent properties and development, and including our own city owned properties. Also incorporating some of the feedback we heard from our stakeholders in the community, including Friends of the Grand Connections. Also looking at constructability and the cost estimating for this project. Moving forward, with the scope refinement, we are planning on delivering a project that is safe for all, usable, as we said earlier, usable end-to-end on day one, within about $150 to $200 million total cost, and also in alignment with the outreach themes, which I will cover later here in a couple of slides. So some of the adjustment we are making, really taking a look at optimizing the structure widths over the freeway. We are looking at minimum 30 feet, but maybe it will not be more than 40 feet. There's still more work on that. Considerable or consolidate all the landscaping to one landscaping area, and it's going to be varies across the bridge. In some areas will be on the outside of the bridge, and some areas will be the divider between the bicyclist and pedestrian paths. Other area, looking at the gathering spaces, really taking a look at the future development of adjacent properties and how we can take advantage of that. And also looking at additional space with the future development of the city on the sites. When it comes to vertical circulation to the structure, we are looking at providing at least in one place, maintaining vertical circulation to provide access, but also evaluating emergency access needed along the route. And last, City Hall Plaza, we're really looking at maintaining the current size of the City Hall Plaza, but with modification to make sure we are facilitating the movement of bicyclists and pedestrians connecting from the crossing into the plaza and beyond. This here graphic really demonstrates what I just covered about the adjustment, but kind of again, overall, on the left side, some of the adjustment we're making, minimizing the impact to City Hall Plaza, but providing that connection. And as you recall, the 30% design calls for 2 nodes, what we call east node and west nodes. These nodes were very large in size. They varied in size between 30 to 80 feet on the west node, 30 to 120 feet on the east node. These got eliminated. And again, as I talked earlier, we're going to be taking advantage of the adjacent development for that, to compensate for that space. Another area, we're looking optimizing the structure widths over 405, and more work actually we need to do on that. And also working closely with potential or upcoming development on the east side of the crossing. So I talk a little bit about the outreach themes and how we moving with this project. We doing these refinement, but also staying with these themes. When we talk about connectivity, making sure again that is connected on day one from one end to the other, and have a direct integration with the future private development. On the safety side, this is what we heard throughout the outreach, is separating bicyclists from pedestrian, and that's what the project will accomplish. And we talk quite a bit about the future development and integration, and this project will accommodate that. And timeline, which is really important to us, with refining that scope. It put us on a shorter timeline to develop the project, but also to construct the project as well. So what's next? We are currently working on the scope refinement. We are actually ready to move on to the next phase. We have evaluated the number of alternative delivery methods, and working with our consultants and other experts around the region, we are proceeding with a GCCM type of contract. A GCCM stands for General Contractor Construction Manager. Really the great advantage of using that method, where we bring a contractor on board while we are designing the project. This way we get not just getting them involved in the design, tapping on their expertise when it comes to constructability, value engineering, and cost estimating as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Anthony.
Slide. Perfect. So in terms of our current funding, design work is fully funded through existing allocations through the 2025-26 Capital Improvement Program. So we are fully prepared to move forward with design. In terms of construction and right-of-way acquisition, if it's required, this portion of work is not yet funded and will require new revenues. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. The funding plan is in development, and having one in place is a very important key element for the state approvals that we will need to move forward with the GCCM delivery method, as Maher just mentioned. That said, we are confident that this project is going to have a very significant economic return for the community. So on screen, you see some of the outcomes accomplished by similar projects, peer projects across the country. We're in the final stages of development of a very similar report for our project based off of projections and anticipated investments. So we're excited to share that soon. It's not quite ready, but very soon. In terms of funding for construction, we're reviewing a broad menu of options in line with our prior conversations. So we've talked about a mix of public funding, corporate and individual philanthropy, and district-based tools. You see some of those on screen here. We are also seeking support from the state through our legislative agenda, and a philanthropic plan is currently in development. We expect to have an early look at a possible capital campaign in the next several months, which we think is going to form an important component. And through all of this, we're keeping in mind that the long-term operations and management of the crossing and the corridor writ large is going to require careful consideration and possibly partnership with some of the organizations that we've been working with, such as the Friends of the Grand Connection and the Bellevue Downtown Association. So more work to come there. Looking forward, we also want to share some of the key council touch points that we anticipate this year. So in the spring, we do expect to return with contracts for the GCCM owner advisor and continued design work. So you'll see those coming soon. This, again, is important for continuing to advance toward the final design and ultimately construction. In the late spring or summer, we do expect to be able to share more information about the conceptual financial plan for the crossing. And then in the fall, if all goes according to plan, we'll be back to launch final design and engineering when we reach that stage. So that's a look forward. And with that, we will open it up to any council commentary or questions.
Great. Really good presentation. How exciting. Thank you. Councilmember Hamilton, let's start with you.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. Each contact I have with the crossing project, I just become more convinced that the crossing is going to be a vital asset for our city. The crossing will provide a safer, environmentally friendly option for 10,000 community members a day to move across 405, connect the new vibrant Wilburton neighborhood to the jobs, fun, and parks of downtown, and help integrate East Trail into everyday life of our community. I'm all the more convinced that the Grand Connection is going to be a highly valued community asset by the broad support that has been expressed in our public outreach efforts to date. I think the staff has done a great job collecting input from community members. Of course, that's going to be critically important to be incorporated to make sure that we get this right. Appreciate the effort that the Friends of the Grand Connection have put in to get us to where we are now. Also appreciate their commitment to supporting this project across the finish line. Doable and memorable is our guiding mantra, as it should be. This is a tough balance to strike, and I think so far we have done a great job of it. Of course, we need the crossing to be doable, but we also need to think about memorable or maybe memorable light. So I think we should consider maybe stretching a little bit more on some of the design elements and landscape elements, remembering that it's also going to be a linear park. I'm glad to see so much work has already been done on budget and funding development. Look forward to staff returning with an overview of a conceptual financial plan. Obviously, this project is not doable without the financial participation of federal, state, and philanthropic funders. So look forward to having you back. I am all in favor of moving this forward at this time. Thank you.
Councilmember Hamilton, I'm going to let you make a motion, then we will continue discussion. Would you like to make that motion?
Yes, thank you. I move to direct staff to procure a consultant to assist with the city's application to the state for approval of the GCCM contracting approach.
Second.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Great job. That was really nice. Jesse, Anthony, Mar, thank you so much for a good presentation that you guys gave us. I also believe this is a project that is going to be a critical piece of our city's infrastructure. And I am also thanking WSP, Friends of Grand Connection, and CTS, and all of the other CTS staff that they are involved. I have wanted to clarify my perception and see if I understood this project correct from the beginning, and then if my new perception is correct. When you guys started in March 18, 2024, my perception and understanding was this is going to be a project that is going to be funded in 3 parts. One city, of course, one state and federal, and then the other one is like our amazing profit partners in the city. So if assume 150 million, 50, 50, 50. It seems due to some of the federal and state stuff, that has changed. Is my original perception correct?
That was the starting point for the conversations based on analogous projects across the country. Our outside advisors are helping us understand what is the correct funding mix based on the refined scope and the current financial environment.
Great. So then my second perception seems not correct, that we are paying the tab in the federal and state. So now I am understanding that since maybe a state and federal are not participating as much as we want, city is taking over that financial. Is that perception wrong?
I think we have not reached that conclusion yet. We're still in conversations, as Anthony mentioned, with the legislature about possible state partnership. Federal funds are a question mark, and our advisors at HRNA are the ones who are taking a look at the financial landscape. They're engaged with our finance director, John Risha, about the options for the city contributions. It's still too early to say where the capital stack will land.
Okay, my last question on this, and then I have one more question. If a state and federal doesn't pan out, is our hope that maybe the other stakeholders chip in more than what we originally anticipated, the 1/3?
I think in a perfect world, it would be wonderful for some of our outside stakeholders to contribute more. Campbell and Company and other advising companies taking a look at what the philanthropic capacity is to invest in this kind of partnership.
I hope that we increase that what was that word?
Philanthropic contributions.
Capacity. Great. One question that I don't want an answer right now, but I would like to understand is when you are going to have this GCCM contract, I would love to understand how are we doing the risk sharing, because as you know, there are risks that is going to happen when his costs go overrun or delays between the contractor and the city. I would love to understand that piece, and also the performance metric that we are going to have with that GC and contractor, how they are going to be tied to the incentive and maybe penalty. So I would love to learn in future and understand how we are doing and managing those pieces. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Sure.
Okay. Councilmember Stokes.
This, to me, is something that is really, really exciting. This concept has been around a long time. When I first came on council in 2012 and BDA started going out to different cities, we went to Denver, and guess what? Denver had what we're working on in a sense is a grand connection to parts of the city and everything else. Came back and started conversations about this, and we've been talking about this a long time. Of course, our concept has grown. It's just amazing. And we know that some in New York and other places, it takes a long time, and we were a smaller city than we are now at the time. But it is so exciting that we're at this point, and we are really coming together and saying we're going to do this. The community is very supportive. Just regular people out in the street, businesses, people wanting to get different places, all of that. It's something that's going to be really, really great for the whole, in this whole region and the state. But we're doing it, so I'm really, really pleased about this, and particularly that the work that you put together. I think we're going to do it. So thank you very much. Great work, and the persistence of both the community, people out there, the council, the staff, and it's gonna happen. So thank you very much for the work, and looking forward to seeing it and take a trip on it sometime.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
Well, vision and good things takes time to happen. And this is something that Bellevue has been looking at for a long time, because the city of Bellevue is divided by 405, from the downtown to the west and the rest of the city to the east. So there's always the dream that we need to connect the two. And so we were able to build a number of interchanges And however, there's also other things that we need to do, like pedestrian crossing, pedestrian corridor, going all the way from Maidenbauer Bay all the way through downtown Park and all the way connected through downtown, then over hopefully to Wilburton. It took so long to get it done. When before I was the mayor, we wanted to do this and we developed the Bellevue corridor. And in a way, this connection is pivotal to connecting or even making Bellevue corridor work. Is connecting downtown Bellevue all the way to the rest of the city. So I'm glad it's actually happening, but it takes a lot of work. So I am glad that we are having this become a reality. So I'm glad that the design is already 30%, and I'm glad that we already have budget. And I appreciate the partnership, the friends of Grand Connection, especially the people that spoke today, businesses. I have to give credit to again Amazon, a great corporate partner, and we want to encourage corporate partners like Amazon to continue to help out in whatever way it is to make city of Bellevue memorable and people identify Bellevue as Bellevue when they get into Bellevue through 405. So instead of having 405 as a detriment, it becomes a asset. A couple questions I want to have is, we know it's going to cost $150 million to do this. So I assume that we already have money to do the design, right? And to do the Grand Connection piece. So you mentioned also $400 million. That's another number you put down. So perhaps you can explain to me, more clearly, what's $150 million accomplished and what's the $400 million going to accomplish. So that'd be great, because I'm concerned, I'm interested to know, one of the things that the staff mentioned, it's definitely a profitable, benefit, economic development project. We'll get lots of benefit back. So I want to know what kind of, some comparisons have been made, as staff presented, and I think that's wonderful. The question I have is, what kind of comparison, what kind of numbers have we made showing the economic return by doing the kind of project that's going to be on the plan for the Grand Connection? That's one. Two, we're going to develop Wilburton eventually. Beside the Grand Connection, Wilburton is going to be developed. And the Grand Connection is essential to the success of Wilburton. So I'd like to see what is the economic return of Wilburton development as well. And the reason I'm asking that is because it has to be considered together. I don't want the Grand Connection to be detrimental to the development of Wilburton. So I'd like to have some idea from the staff, how does the Grand Connection work together with Wilburton development so that it's going to maximize our economic return. Some of the proposal you mentioned was TIFIA. It's the tax incremental financing, which is good. But, we're seeing that there's some economics that's be changing, various other things. A municipal bond, we cannot make it tax exempt anymore. So there's a lot of moving parts. Like the Deputy Mayor was asking, with the federal government being uncertain. So I'd like to see some consideration, some contingency. I'm glad to hear the staff saying that we got it all covered. But I think it would be good for the council to know a little bit more. I know we've got to do the preliminary design. There's no question. We need to do that. We need to move forward. I think $150 million, I think we probably can manage in some way. But the rest of it, I'd like to know more. Not so in terms of money spent, but in terms of what kind of economic return we're actually going to get from developing Grand Connection and the benefit of the Wilburton development.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Let's for the answer.
Yes, so Maher, if you can speak to the
Sure.
difference between the visionary and the go-forward plan, we can cover the other two questions.
Sure, yes, I'll take that first question. So I'm going to go back to, oops, moving. Okay. Yeah, good question, Councilmember Lee. And a lot of questions. How did we go from $400 million down to $150 to $200 million? So as we continuing our refinement work, the couple major items that we took out of this project is the east and west nodes. As I said, these nodes, they varied in width from 30 on the west side to 80 feet, on the east side to 120 feet. They were very elaborate. The size of structure, elevated structure with vertical circulation, both using elevators and stairs. So these were some of the major costs that we eliminated. The other item is on the west here, what you see on your screen, matching to City Hall Plaza. In the 30% design, we really try to maximize and taking opportunity of expanding that plaza and making the connection with the refinement and looking at other opportunities. We're just making the minimal possible to connect to the plaza, but also investing a little bit in the plaza itself to facilitate the movement of bicyclists and pedestrian. Also, we'll look at some of the improvement we had in the 30% on the current city-owned sites like the Lincoln Center. Again, we felt that we can leave that for the future opportunity in developing these sites. And last but not least, also opportunities working with the private development, as the case here on the east side with KGIP development coming in. So we're gonna work with that developer to provide that connection. So all of these combined, we feel very comfortable that we can scope a project that costs right now. We're still talking a range, $150 to $200 million, but we feel confident we can accomplish that. At the same time, what we're trying to really make sure we don't preclude any future opportunities, whether expansion or connection, and other enhancement like canopies as well. That's one thing I didn't mention. In the 30% design, you will see some of these elaborate canopies from one end to the other. We are taking these out, but we are gonna put the necessary connection for that future enhancement. With that.
All right, so I can speak to the Wilburton integration, and then Anthony, I'll ask you to speak to some of the types of things that we'll be getting back from HR&A. So Councilmember Lee, to your question about how this works with the Wilburton and supporting the implementation of that vision, we are fortunate that the work on the design was concurrent with the Wilburton process. So as the planning team was working with the property owners on the vision for Wilburton's future, this project was parallel processed with that. So a lot of conversations between the Wilburton team, WSP and transportation, and with the property owners in Wilburton. So a lot of the alignment of this final route makes sure that we maximize the redevelopment opportunities both for all of the parcels, both the city-owned and the privately owned. So as we look at the KGIP parcel that is east of 116th, the alignment allows them to integrate with the Grand Connection in a way that allows them to help deliver the Grand Connection and also facilitate their vision for redevelopment. So over time, this will be a project that stitches together Wilburton and downtown in a way that facilitates movement, commerce, support for small business, and some of the things that we are looking at for the future redevelopment of Wilburton would provide some additional civic soul that would help bring people into Wilburton and get them excited about redeveloping in that neighborhood. And all of that is being analyzed by our consultants at HR&A, who have given us some preliminary numbers, but we're still looking at them because they might have seemed a little too good.
We're still vetting them. So we received a really great draft report from HRNA actually a couple weeks ago, and we've been working through the document with them to try to understand, okay, what is the actual economic benefit of this project? And basically what they're analyzing is, we know many properties in Wilburton, for example, are going to redevelop. The crossing may result in them redeveloping more quickly. And we can quantify that. So we're working through that work with them right now, and we expect to have a report that we'll be able to share very soon. But it includes things like in numbers in terms of incremental tax revenue to the city, incremental economic output as a result of the crossing, incremental property value as a result of the crossing that private developers will get to take advantage of. So just to give a sense of color in terms of the economic benefit of the project, those are the types of things that HRNA is analyzing and we'll be able to share more detail on soon.
Great answers. No, I'm going to move on, Conrad.
This is a great economic development project. I want to compliment you guys. If it works out, this is wonderful. This is one of the biggest things we've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Newhouse.
Yeah, I won't belabor all the great comments and questions and great answers too. So thank you, Jesse, Anthony, and Mar for the great presentation. I'm very excited about moving this forward here tonight, and as well as keeping under that mantra of doable grant. And how I've defined that as, pursuing an ambitious vision while staying grounded in practicality. And I think that's exactly what you're pursuing here. So just a couple of quick questions for you. The number of grants that you mentioned, I believe it's very early on here, like on slide 4. What's the total budget for that? So how many grants do you think we can provide to vendors or organizations that want to activate the space for different reasons and different events?
Yeah, right now we have a variety of different grant scales that people can apply for because people are going to propose different types of projects.
Yeah.
The total amount is right now we are budgeting $150,000.
Okay.
And that's just the grant award. We are also looking at potentially some ways that we can also cover some of their permitting fees.
And for those watching right now, is that available for them to apply right now, or will it be in the future, and where can they do that?
In the next several weeks at bellevuewad.gov.
Okay, fantastic. On the public art plan, will the Art Commission be involved in that, in those discussions and the type of art and working, I guess, with the consultant that you mentioned who developed that great piece in Tampa Bay? So will they have a role in this as well, and will you be coming back to council to describe what that art program is going to look like?
Yes, absolutely. So the consultants will engage with the Arts Commission on the overall plan, get feedback from the community. They have a robust community engagement program as part of their work. I believe at the moment we're planning for it to be just the plan. So any individual pieces that result from the plan would go through the Arts Commission, and depending on the size and scope of the budget for those pieces, they would also come to council.
Okay, so we will have a separate budget just for the art pieces then?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then kind of a follow-up to the Deputy Mayor's question, and you might not have that answer tonight, but I mean, there's a number of different funding sources. I'd just be curious about, in an ideal world, and I know there's some things that are outside our control, as you've mentioned, but with these other similar projects, be it Denver or Dallas or what have you, typically what dominoes need to fall first in order to get the momentum started and to fully fund this? Is it from the public sector? Is it private? What do we need to show early on that this is going to become a reality and really, has that momentum to go all the way through to finish it? I don't know if you can speak to that now, or you want to come back later. It sounds like you're doing some due diligence, still working with, but if there's like a broad framework that you can just provide now, I'd be interested in hearing it.
Absolutely, we can provide a broad brushstroke in all of the projects that we've looked at across the country. The sponsoring government, whether it's city, county, their commitment to getting the project done is one of the key pieces for unlocking all of the other investments. And I think that we have already demonstrated that through our commitment to funding 100% design.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. And I too just want to thank, I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches how many organizations we have that are willing to be a part of this, both big and small that have been mentioned, you know, be it Amazon or Belden Cafe. We have people that want this to see this all the way through. And Charmaine, do we have that Zoom feed from the El Gaucho right now that we could say? No, that's down? Okay. Anyways, I want to thank them as well that can't be here right now. They didn't make it back. But thank you, everyone who contributed comments, have been a part of this project since day one. It's amazing, and I couldn't agree more with my colleague here. We're going to get this done, and this is going to be amazing when it is. So thank you.
Great comments. You know, when you look at the history of the downtown park, it had this momentum, it had this community passion around it, and we had a lot of leaders involved, and so it's really exciting to see the next iteration of this in Bellevue. I have a few questions here. When you look at the municipal tools, I wonder if we can consider what it would take to do the weatherization in the first round and not wait necessarily. I just like that to be part of the analysis. When we talk about the Civic Plaza, I would really like to include the Maidenbauer Center in that conversation so that we're looking at the whole picture there. When we talk about community programming, you know, you have that incredible picture of India Day. And I just love that picture because it looks like a mock-up of what we want to see youth in that area. It was just so utilized, and there were so many people, and it's so beautiful. I want to make sure that we're reaching out to all our consular offices and making sure that they know that we have facilities to support the enrichment of the culture in our city that they represent. So they do a good job. I don't know that they always know they can do that. And then this is a question I asked you when we had our briefing, and I thought your answer was so good I would ask it again and have you tell the in public. A lot of people have asked, why are we not privatizing this completely? And so can you explain again why the city is kind of taking charge of this project as opposed to privatizing the whole thing?
Absolutely. I'll start and then ask Maher to fill in the details. One of the key pieces is just the complexity of building over an interstate highway, over public and private property. It is not an easy endeavor, and one of the biggest pieces is just the cost of building over 405 that contributes to the overall cost. So I'll ask Maher to fill in the details.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You talk about it's a public infrastructure going over a state highway, and again, there are different economics here at plays when you have a public works project versus a private projects, and we hear a lot about, well, private work can be done cheaper, faster, but again, it's a different economics, and it kind of will be offset by, for instance, over the freeway as a public facility, we are working with WashDOT on what we call a free airspace lease versus if this has become a private, then you would be paying a lease to WashDOT for using that space basically over the freeway. And a number of other elements also takes in place. Even if we privatize this project, the minute you put into public dollars in it, whether it's city or federal, it becomes as a public works project. So definitely we can always take a look at that, but our experience tells us you really don't gain anything one way or another.
Great. Thank you. Good answer.
I hope this is the same what I gave you last
Yep,
time.
and I appreciate it. You're consistent. So we have a motion that we've approved. Without further comment, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great. Passes.
Thank you.
We're gonna take a quick break and come back at 8:15, okay? we're back in session, and we have our last study session item. City Manager, would you like to introduce that, please?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Last fall, Councilmember Newenhouse initiated an item for research and review, and council gave us direction to evaluate potential mandatory minimum sentencing for repeat offenders of public disorder crimes. And work led by our city attorney's office, they researched the policy issues and identified key considerations for council discussion and review. Earlier this year, you heard from our police chief, Wendell Shirley, and his leadership team that our overall crime is down year over year, and that Bellevue continues to be a safe place for our community members to live and work. And at the same time, we have seen some increase in several public disorder crimes. In that presentation, you also heard that the police department in Bellevue follows the prevention, intervention, and enforcement approach, and that all of the components are essential for preventing and mitigating crimes. Tonight, Trisna Tanis, our city attorney, will share information about public disorder crimes, about how coordination and collaboration occurs between our police department and our prosecution team, and how the work that they do results in favorable prosecutorial outcomes for those public disorder crimes. She'll also inform council about the mandatory minimum sentencing and what potential elements are important to consider if a new policy is pursued. This is a complex policy issue. I'm certain there will be questions. We'll do our best to answer those questions tonight, but also understand that we may not be able to answer all the questions. And so we'll take good note of those, and we'll do our best to get back to them. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Trisna Tanis. And I would also like to introduce Courtney Popp, an assistant city attorney who has been working with Trisna on this issue. So Trisna, please take it away.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. Thank you for having us tonight here to talk about reducing public disorder crimes or mandatory minimum sentences. So for direction, this evening we are going to be asking council to provide feedback and then direction on whether to advance an ordinance imposing mandatory minimum sentences for repeat offenders of public disorder crimes. For our agenda tonight, we're going to be recalling council's goal that was stated in that October meeting of last year and the direction that was given to us. We'll summarize the key issues of this topic and our findings, talk about the components of mandatory minimum sentences, and then back to requesting for that direction. So back in October 29th of last year, council stated a goal to reduce public disorder crimes in Bellevue. The direction was to conduct necessary research and analysis related to repeat offenses of these crimes, and then to bring back options and recommendations, including, if appropriate, a mandatory minimum sentence ordinance for repeat offenders of these crimes. In trying to achieve the reduction of public disorder crimes, we really identified three key issues for us to answer and to do some analysis and research on. We wanted to understand what are the public disorder crimes that are affecting Bellevue, what are those crimes that are impactful to Bellevue's community, and what are those that we should be focused on. We wanted to understand who are committing the crimes, so who are the offenders of these crimes. And then we want to understand what enforcement tools are available in order to reduce these crimes. So the first issue, identifying public disorder crimes in Bellevue, we first looked at what crimes are being reported most in Bellevue. So the crimes that resulting in financial loss and decreased public safety are all of these crimes. We pulled data from the last 3 years, so 22, 23, and 24. And then, so we see these top 6 crimes. Most of the crimes are theft crimes, but you see the top crimes of shoplifting at the very top there and theft from motor vehicles or vehicle prowling. So again, 5 of these top 6 crimes are theft crimes. Shoplifting and theft from motor vehicles are the 2 highest crimes in Bellevue. They make up almost triple and double the next crime down in that list. And then shoplifting makes up 2/3 of all theft third-degree crimes in Bellevue. And notably, shoplifting has increased year over year, all the way from 22 to last year. This is in contrast to what you heard from PD's report in early February in terms of crimes decreasing in Bellevue. So there's a stark difference to shoplifting here in our community.
So once we've identified what crimes you may consider to be part of an ordinance that looked at public disclosure crimes, then the next step is to look at who might the repeat offenders be, in particular as to Bellevue at a prosecution level. So the first thing we identified, of course, is we're discussing misdemeanors, which is what we have the control over through our Bellevue court system. Our felonies are prosecuted by the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. When we looked at identifying the offenders in Bellevue, we were pleased to note that of the referred crimes to the prosecutor's office, they are charging over 85% of those cases that are proceeding forward. And 93% of those crimes are also receiving a favorable outcome. In other words, a guilty plea or some other conviction or alternative sentencing. So we are seeing that these matters are being handled appropriately. When we looked then at sort of the next steps, we started thinking, okay, so this is the general offender pool. Then we started thinking of what makes them a repeat offender. And at first this may seem somewhat arbitrary, but we did the best with the data that's available. And one of the complications is that we keep data within the prosecutor's office that is different from the data that's maintained by the police department. They have federal reporting requirements that are distinct from those that would go to the court system. But what we were able to see is we looked at the best snapshot we could think of. And one month that stood out to us that we looked at much more closely was December of 2024. And council members, you were aware that that was when the police department was engaged in a very successful campaign against retail theft called Stop the Lift. So that was also extremely useful. What we found when we looked at the past 2 years, and that seems again arbitrary, but that also mirrors what other cities who are looking at these ordinances are using. It also mirrors the probationary period that these offenders would be subject to. So while it sounds like we made it up, it does have a basis in the reality of the sentencing. So we saw that 8% of those offenders had 2 or more prior offenses. That sort of begins to identify that we're talking about a limited population, which is actually beneficial. We're able to drill down from the greater population. Many folks may be committing crimes, at least in Bellevue, as a transitory experience to our city or a one-time bad life choice. So that is a different set of folks that we would not be targeting with an ordinance attaining a mandatory minimum. So that subset is where we moved forward. And then once we sort of extrapolated that data, you've seen this acronym before in your police department presentations. My client focuses on the PI philosophy, which is prevention, intervention, and enforcement. A mandatory minimum sentencing scheme would be considered a tool in the enforcement toolbox. So not one of any option will ever be the answer to criminal behavior. What law enforcement and the courts and the prosecutors need is a full toolbox with which to address the ever-changing issues that involve the safety of our community. So here, when we're looking at enforcement, a mandatory minimum is going to be on that second, that end result, right? Unfortunately. We do, of course, want to prevent crimes. That's much better for our community. It's better for visitors to our town. It's better for our officers. But we also need strong tools once a crime has been committed. So the most common enforcement tools that you'll be familiar with are, of course, incarceration, jail time. Jail time is not something that comes for free. We have to contract and pay on a daily rate for anyone that we hold in custody. That rate varies from a minimum of $140 up to over $300 a day for our local jurisdictions. That doesn't mean that that's a reason we wouldn't do it, but it's just something to be aware. The more people we put in custody, the larger that bill grows. And it is a large bill because one of the things Bellevue Police does is they book offenders upon arrest, which is something that other jurisdictions are not doing and something that I think the police department as well as the community and our efforts in crime reduction show is a very important tool in the toolbox. Folks know that if they come to Bellevue and commit a crime and they are arrested, they will be taken into custody and will not have their weekend free. They will be facing the immediate consequence of their action. So that is something that we enjoy as a tool. But the mandatory minimum would increase the potential for jail time. So it's very hard to estimate exactly what that dollar amount would be. When we looked again at that drilled down data from December, we could estimate that at least on a yearly basis, we might be looking at 12 to 15 people. So that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you start saying that's $300 a day, maybe it could be a sizable amount. Again, not necessarily a reason for or against, but just a consideration. And the indirect costs, of course, are also something we can't ignore. You know, as a community, these are our community members as well. Folks who are offenders are also parents and they are also workers. Any time in custody is a time when they are not contributing to their home or their community. They're not holding a job. So sometimes increasing jail time can actually have not a deterrent effect, but it can actually compound the problems that led them to criminal behavior. Again, just something that we consider. So the mandatory minimum sentence, the idea would be that the ordinance would be in addition to the general sentencing scheme. It would be something available to the prosecutor. We would provide notice to any offender who would be subject to this sentence. It would, at this point, the idea seems to be add, a significant period of jail time, but it's important to note that when we looked at the data from resulting sentences and similar offenders, so those folks who had prior theft and motor vehicle prowl offenses in the prior 2 years, when we looked at the sentences they're being awarded, they are consistent with this amount of jail time. So we are seeing on average 18 to 32 days were the jail sentences that were imposed by the judges overseeing Bellevue Court at the request of our prosecutor. So it is possible that the end goal could be achieved, but again, there is a benefit to also having on the books a public statement that Bellevue takes this level of crime seriously, and this is our intent. So the other piece that comes into play are some of our alternative programs. So other enforcement tools that we are fortunate in Bellevue, we have a plethora of probation options, treatment options, and now we are in the early stages of developing and rolling out a community court in the city of Bellevue, which is a tremendous asset to our criminal justice efforts. The anticipated date is the summer of 2025. So I know that it has come up in some of the questions about what does this mean against mandatory minimum sentencing. They're not mutually exclusive. We would be looking at crafting an ordinance that would allow for the support of both of these tools. Not everyone is going to end up being eligible for community court, and not everyone is an appropriate offender to sentence to a mandatory minimum. So by allowing discretion for the prosecutor and the court, we allow both of those tools to coexist. We support Bellevue's efforts in a variety of reasons on a case-by-case basis. So we're looking forward to this new opportunity as well.
So mandatory minimum sentence ordinance, if council wants to move forward with this, would be a new tool for Bellevue. As Courtney mentioned, it's another tool in the toolbox. It must be adopted by ordinance, and it does have the potential to deter offenders or repeat offenders from committing these crimes in Bellevue. So, and of course, it has that potential to meet council's goal of reducing these crimes in Bellevue. So next one, that's okay. So if council does want to move forward with a mandatory minimum sentence based on our findings, which we've just presented to you, these are the main components that we want to recommend. We would want to define public disorder crimes as those two top crimes. These are the crimes that are affecting Bellevue community the most. They're the most prevalent. And we want to be able to address these crimes that are most impactful to us. We want to define repeat offender as 18 years or older with 2 or more convictions of the same public disorder crime in Washington within the last 2 years. As Courtney was going through, we want to focus on these offenders that are committing these crimes over and over again So we want to really target these repeat offenders. And then we are, in doing that, we're suggesting that we don't want to go back too many years before, because those are not the ones that we want to focus on. The mandatory minimum sentence would be 30 days minimum, so that's the floor. Right now, those crimes, shoplifting and vehicle prowl, you can sentence up to 364 days. So between 0 and 364, mandatory minimum sentence would set that floor at 30 days. The exceptions here is participation and completion in community court, diversion, probation, other similar programs. So again, it's not one or the other, it's a combination of both. So if somebody is able to be eligible and they participate and they complete the community court or diversion program, then they would be exempted from having to serve that mandatory minimum sentence. So with that, back to the direction here is we're asking council to provide feedback, and then any direction on whether to advance this ordinance imposing mandatory minimum sentence for repeat offenders of public disorder crimes. And with that, we are available for any questions, and I'll turn it back to you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Newenhouse, this was your initiative, so I'm going to let you start us off.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. First of all, great presentation, Trisna and Courtney, and thank you so much for all the hard work that you've put into this and providing not only me but the entire council with some great data. Although, unfortunately, some of the data is limited. I know some of it was a little tough to get through too, like manually having to go back and look into files about repeat offenders. And, you know, what started me down this path partly too was the raw police report has it much higher in terms of these types of public disorder crimes. So I think that's important to keep in mind with this as well. But I want to thank the overwhelming support from the community that we've seen from emails or calls. I want to thank the Washington Retail Association for weighing in on this, the Bellevue Police Officers Guild is supportive of this, retailers and property owners, both big and small, the chamber that was in favor of looking at this analysis. Really appreciate all the support to take a look at this and really send the message that we understand that these top two, and I agree with defining this as public disorder crimes, clearly rise to the top. I mean, they are so much more, dare I say, out of control than some of the other ones that were on that list. I could argue that they can all be considered, public disorder crimes. However, for this purpose, I'm fine with attacking those top two. So. As well as on the repeat offender, absolutely adult, 18 years or older, and then the 2 or more convictions in that 2-year period. Yes on the 30 days, and then yes on the exceptions, which I'll speak to a little bit more. But for me, and I'm sure all my colleagues have heard it time and time again. Don't let Bellevue turn into Seattle, and I don't say that to be as a dig on Seattle, because I love Seattle and want to see Seattle thrive, but. I think they've heard all the news reports. They've seen the amount of especially shoplifting, but also other crimes that have really led to the either real or perceived concerns about public safety. But then also this is very much about as you've mentioned here too, about economic development, and this is also about an affordability issue as well. Because these costs, when residents or businesses get broken into or items stolen, there's a cost to that. And a lot of times those costs, what happens? It gets passed along to the consumer. And at a time when we're seeing out of control inflation and eggs costing, more than my house, I mean, this is a real concern for a lot of people. I mean, we're already dealing with so many affordability issues in our city. So, a lot of the, and I've witnessed this with my own eyes at my local QFC multiple times as well, about the, shoplifters, and I've heard so much from residents as well. about car prowls and just the threat to our community. And I went back to this report, this great report by Challenge Seattle, led by former Governor Christine Gregoire, that put together what this threat to our community really means, especially when it comes to shoplifting. So for large and small retailers, that means loss of revenue. That means significant product leakage. That means increased costs for security, right? Security measures, security personnel, security equipment, training staff. Again, those costs get passed along to the consumer. Employees, they face greater violence, they feel less safe, they may be dealing with morale issues, lack of resources for employee support. And then consumers, they feel less safe, they're paying more, they're facing store closures or quality of goods, or as a lot of the emails have said, they got to ask for help every 5 minutes because the product that they want to get is behind a glass door and they can't get to it anymore. So those are some of the real costs. And then car prowling, if you're counting on your car to get you to work and you wake up in the morning and someone has broken into your car, there's a cost associated with that. Insurance might not cover it. Or maybe your insurance costs are going to go up. Or maybe there are other items in there that were not covered by insurance that you're now out of pocket for. So there's real costs associated with this. And I appreciate the cost of having to put individuals in jail, but there's also a cost that we're seeing happen right here, right now, to businesses, to residents, and overall city impact. Because for a local government, this increased criminal activity requires, greater resources. We've seen it now. I mean, that's the whole reason Chief Shirley did the Stop the Lift, right? Putting all those resources towards this. And it's potentially loss of sales tax revenue to the city as well as this escalates. So these are things that I'm concerned about going forward. But I'm glad you mentioned about the misdemeanor crimes. Maximum sentence of 90 days is my understanding, but a gross misdemeanor would be a maximum sentence of 364 days. So in both cases, well beyond the 30 days that we're talking about here. Because currently there's no mandatory minimum penalty for public disorder crimes, which is, why I hope my colleagues will support, this ordinance on public disorder crime in Bellevue by implementing a mandatory minimum sentencing. Now, you saw in the memo, the shoplifting is the most frequently reported crime in Bellevue, followed closely by car prowls. And the city attorney's office analysis, shoplifting has gone up 17% in 2023, 12% in 2024, and it just keeps growing. And a lot of this is underreported. We know that. Yeah. Police know that. A lot of people, residents say, what's the point? They're not going to catch them, or it's not a priority. Or QFC or the Bartels or the retailers, they might not have the process to report, or maybe they're short on staff and they can't actually fill it out, or maybe they're actually even told by their employer not to report. So my point is that these numbers are much, much higher than the data that we currently have. And I would hope that with an ordinance like this, we actually might get more data out of it. Because if they know that we're tracking repeat offenders, they might be more inclined and more motivated to actually track this, because then they know there could be some serious consequences at the end of the line if it rose to that occasion. So I mentioned that, I want to reiterate about the Stop the Lift campaign, which is hugely successful, and really applaud BPD for initiating that during the holiday season. And I think that's the best data that we have from that emphasis patrol at Victoria Mall as well as Bellevue Square Mall. They arrested 161 people, and out of that 161, 58 people were repeat offenders. That's nearly 40%. I think that is a much closer number that we're dealing with in our community right now, and I think that's the latest numbers that we have, and I think the most accurate numbers that we have if we had more data. So I'd argue that accountability and real consequences to this type of behavior in our city, it's something we're striving for, and I really applaud, again, BPT and the City Attorney's Office for working extremely hard to do that. But by implementing this ordinance, I think we'd send a very clear message. Don't come to Bellevue to repeatedly commit these types of crimes, because not only will we arrest you, as we pointed out numerous times, but there will be serious time to be served if you repeatedly do it and get caught. Again, this is just common sense. If we'll further our reputation as a place not to come if you want to commit crimes repeatedly. It does not impact a prosecutor's ability to defer someone to community court. I think we all want to encourage that deferment of any sentencing with anyone who needs a drug rehabilitation, mental health service, or any other type of service. But where this really comes into play, I think the majority of the time will be if they break that agreement. If they get sentenced to community court to address a drug issue, for example, but they don't fulfill that agreement to go through that program, I think that's when this 30 days will, on the vast majority, unless the prosecutor feels differently, will come into play. But again, it adds some real teeth, and it's far from the max sentence. So I want to make sure that is very clear, and all these other options remain at the discretion of the prosecutor. So bottom line to wrap up is that a measured, consistent accountability for criminal conduct deters crime. This is proven. And unlike other municipalities, we need to further our reputation as a city that will detain, arrest, and prosecute. If the crime is repeatedly conducted in our city, there'll be the real consequences to those actions in the form of mandatory sentence for those who repeatedly come to Bellevue to shoplift and car prowl. Again, we're sticking to those two as a definition. So accountability matters, the consequences for criminal behavior matters, and I really hope that coming together right now, we send that message to those that see Bellevue as a lucrative target, which they still do, that repeat criminal offenders will not be tolerated in our community, and together we can create a safer community for everybody who lives, works, or plays in Bellevue. So, thank you.
Okay, well. That was a lot. I think everybody has something they'd like to say as well. I'm actually going to go next. I appreciate everything you said, Councilmember Neuenhuis. I agree with a lot of what you said, and I do think that Bellevue, any city that has a mall, and we have two, is a target city, and we see that all over across the country. So my goal in having something like this is 4 things. One would be to decrease public disorder crimes, to prevent them, be a deterrent to them. And if we have fewer of those crimes, then it makes it easier for the police to do their job and work on, other things that go on in our city. And then the 4th thing is we have a very successful probation program with a very low recidivism rate. And so for me, the more people that we can get through those programs, whether it's community court, probation, or treatment, that's good. And this is kind of a tool, I think, to get more people through those programs. So I really do support the concept of this. I will say, however, our community court is not up and running until July, and that's projected. So we don't know for sure that we'll be running in July. So what I would like to see, and we'll listen to my fellow council members, is come back in 6 months with this. Let's have the community court up and running, and let's get some data from the other cities that we were not able to get data from, and let's, have this conversation with a little more data. So when we say bring it back, yes, I'd like to bring it back, but not for 6 months. I'd like to get a little more information before we have a final discussion whether to vote it in or not. So that's just me. Let's see, Councilmember Lee.
Well, I think Councilmember Newhouse made a very passionate and very, I think, necessary appeal for this issue, which is important to, I think, most people in Bellevue and to me as well. Even though, I know that when we first, a few years back, started to have people going to stores in Victoria, walking away with all the goodies without having to pay, people are complaining. And the customers, especially, when they go down, when they see this happening, the store owners cannot do anything. So it becomes apparent that people are not afraid and they're ignoring because the punishment is non-existent because they're not even being apprehended. when the police, when the mall owners, number one, the owners, the stores don't do anything because they have no way to confront these people who can become dangerous. So it's for the safety of employees as well. And then the store owners, similarly, it's another responsibility which they are not really well equipped to handle. And when you get the police officers to arrive, the perpetrator is already gone, so you have to catch him red-handed. So I think we did a lot of things to make it work better, including having police cars parked, in visible locations. But still, people, these criminals are pretty smart. They're not going to go in and get caught red-handed. So I think we need to come up with all kinds of ways to discourage it. That's really the point. The point is we need to have ways to discourage the criminals or the offenders. I don't want to use the criminals. They are not guilty until they are, I guess, judged to be, to be criminals. So, but they need to be apprehended. They need to, and once they are judged to be, offending, then they need to be given the sentencing that would discourage them to make a difference. And whatever they need, I think even though the recidivism or the repeat is low, sounds like it is. But I believe that every little bit helps. If we do not discourage them, if we let them get away with it, it's going to increase. And why not stop it before it gets worse? So I think we can do this and we can watch it. And if it doesn't improve, and if we indeed find the statistics are getting better, or the statistics proves that it's not necessary, or if we prove that the cost becomes prohibitive, and if it's not justifiable, I always look at cost-benefit analysis. And if we find that, we can always make changes. So at this point, I would like to support this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Stokes?
Yeah, and I appreciate the thorough review of this. I guess what I understand the concept and why it might have some good benefit, but there's an inconsistency in what we're getting in terms of the numbers of people and how it's handled and all. And as I think the mayor said, where there's other things that should come in play before we do something like this, even if we agree this is the thing to do. And yet the conversation is about a lot of, make you think that that's probably 1,417 people doing this and not being caught. And it's, I don't know, there's some inconsistency in it. It's something that I think we need to concentrate on. If you have 12 to 15 people involved, and you didn't clearly say, of those people, are they getting other type of work, and the police doing something different, or are these people just going out and not having any thing happen to them at all? And that's a very small number of people, but they can do a lot of damage. But I don't know. I wish we could approach this on, these are the numbers, this is what is happening, and this is what we're going to do, and not conflate it by talking about a global thing that's happened. And it clearly is that things have come down, and these crimes are not as they have been in the past. And it sounds like the police and other people involved in this actually are doing a lot to make sure that people don't continue to do this. If only 113 out of 1,417 and only 12 to 15 people are involved in this, and I just want to make sure we're doing this in a way that's, we're not doing something to look like we're doing something and it's taking a lot of time and energy and money and not actually addressing other issues. On the other hand, if we could get it focused and not be adding things on to that are not connected to this, to make people think that we really need to do something and have a little fear, and look at this way, I could see doing this, and I think the mayor is right that we need to make sure that everything is set in the department and what we're doing before we put something in place. And have the conversation, do a little more work on this, because again, this is something everybody gets upset about it and everybody talks about it. And but our job is to try to do something that actually works and is legal, and legal not only in the sense of, the law part, but something that actually works and doesn't overly, just doesn't keep people upset about things. So it's a hard question to answer, and I wouldn't be hesitant to try this if we do more. I think I'd like to see some more research on this, because this is still pretty muddy in terms of what the reality is out there. And crime has gone down a lot, but it's difficult. And part of it is maybe we have to hire more people to work on it too. So a lot of questions in this, and I would not want to jump in to do this and then it not really work as well, or not not actually do the job that we want done on this. So I'm not saying I wouldn't like go along with having this work, because 10 people can do a lot of damage.
Well,
But-
the question is, do we want to bring it back to consider?
Yeah.
And my suggestion is to bring it back in
Okay,
6 months to
that's
consider.
kind of what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, I think I hear
Yeah.
you saying that. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I wrote a note and I lost my list. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, of course. Thank you, Teresna and Courtney Pop, am I right? Thank you so much for being here and doing this analysis for us. The presentation is solid, although I have some question also. Before that, I just wanted to thank Councilmember Neuenhuis to bring this policy, and also all of the emails that we have received for the last week that support this. I think as a body, as a council, we are all committed to decrease the crime and ensure there is a real consequences for repeat offenses. I think we are sending a very strong message through even this effort and also with the sound policy. I have some question, bear with me. If you can start with the slide 9, I can go through my questions very fast and then I can have my comment. Slide 9. This is something that caught my eyes and I wanted to share with my fellow council members. That, am I right that this policy addressed the 8%? So I would love to see something for the 92%. So I would love to, we come up as a body with your help, with the police help, with the prosecutor help, to somehow prevent first time and less frequent offenders from going to the 2+. And I think the majority is there, so hopefully we can do something to prevent that from happening. So can you go to slide 6, please? So the slide 6 shows the public disorder crimes. I am not really following the argue for top 2 based on the data based on the number of happening. I could understand the argue of which one is the worst for our community. That makes sense to me. So if we want to do that, I argue to do it for all of them. How do we know the theft of motor vehicles next year is, instead of 713, don't become 955? how we know that? Are we going to do this data tracking every year to see what are the top 2 are, and then we just revise that? So to me, if we are doing this, we should do that for all of them, or at least decide which one has the most negative impact and do for that, instead of just going by the number of happening that can fluctuate per year. Can you go to slide 15, please? Thank you for bearing. My question on slide 15 is, it says if there is a person who repeat a crime 3 times, if they go to court, they have the option to go to community court or 30 days jail. I believe 99.9% of the human being would say they wanted to go to the community court. My question is, what happens if we know that that person, for the first and the second time, they have already served the community court in different jurisdictions that they have? And we know for a fact it didn't work, so then why are we giving them for the third time an option that for the first time and the second time didn't work? So again, if you're going with this, I think we should have that as an additional condition. So these are all my kind of concerns about this specific proposal.
Can I ask you
Yeah.
something on that? Isn't that kind of up to the prosecutor or the judge when they see that, whether?
Yeah, that could be part of that, but my point is,
Is there any discretion?
So maybe I can help answer that
Yeah.
question. So eligibility to participate in community court or probation or whatever diversion program, you could be eligible for it, but it still has to be agreed upon by our prosecutor and in the court. So if our prosecutor is seeing that someone is committing this over and over again, even if they've gone through a treatment program and it hasn't worked for them, they have that discretion to be able to say, no, even though you may be eligible, on paper, we're not going to agree for you to go through and do another stint on this. And then also just in terms of probation and other diversion program that is not community court-based, there is a length of time for that probation to go through. So it could be a year, it could be 2 years. So they have to go through a whole year without committing any crime whatsoever. If they do commit something, then they fall out of that program. They automatically are no longer able to complete that program. So there is a length of time too, in terms of kind of that look back of 2 years. If somebody is on probation for a year, they have to finish that whole year. So I don't know if that helps.
That helps, but the way I read that, and again, maybe I'm wrong, is if I am doing this 3 times, mandatory minimum sentence is 30 days, I am going to be exempt or exception if I agree to the community court. If that's a wrong understanding, please correct me, and it seems I am not following this correctly.
They have to complete the entire program. So if they're eligible and our prosecutors, the court agree for them to enter the program, they would do the whatever conditions, work crew, education, training, treatment, whatever those conditions may be, and they're on probation for a year.
No, my question is before that. So if I have done this 3 times, and I am reading this, and I am the guilty person, can the prosecutor say, no, you don't have these exceptions because you already have done twice of this?
Yes, they
Okay.
do have that discretion. They look at the entire record of that individual.
Okay, so I think
to
that
make
should be a little bit
determination.
more, the way I read the memo and to me, that was not the discretion of prosecution. If I am eligible, means if I agree to do that community court, I am doing the community court, although I have done it twice before. So you are saying that's on the prosecutor discretion. That's awesome. That's actually the key segue to my main question of unintended consequences. And my question here, I don't want to solid data and numbers. I just wanted to know if there is any anecdotal study or research that you have done with the previous, with the cities who have done this, or with our prosecutor, or with our police staff. One is on the resource management. Can be there a negative unintended consequence that by this mandatory minimum sentencing, we are going to strain our court resources, potentially leading to some backlogs and diverting resources from more serious offenses? That's one question I would love an answer. The other one is, as you touch on that in your presentation, on the prosecutor flexibility, what is the unintended consequence? Is there any unintended consequence that we are limiting the prosecutorial discretion and hinder their ability to be able to negotiate cases, may incentivize pleading to the incorrect charges? Are we removing this flexibility out of them, and is there any negative consequences?
I'll do my best to answer that question. So I'm going to answer it by talking about implications of the mandatory minimum sentence ordinance as opposed to unintended consequences. Just because it's unintended is, I guess, debatable. It could be intended that you'd want to limit prosecutorial discretion, for instance. But first, mandatory minimum sentences is a complicated topic in itself, and it is being placed within a very complicated criminal justice, social justice ecosystem. So while the purpose of mandatory minimum sentence is to enhance deterrence, and certainly that could be the outcome of that, we can anticipate that it's going to be very difficult to actually quantify the effectiveness of the ordinance itself, because it is part of a larger larger set of toolboxes and just a lot of other things that play into it. Mandatory minimum sentence is also a blunt tool. It is sort of a one-size-fits-all, where in reality, every case is different. So right now, the prosecutors, based on the criminal the offender's score and record, the mitigating circumstances, what the crime was, kind of the whole entirety of the facts of the case, they would be looking at all of that and then recommending and seeking a certain sentence to the court. And the judge also has that same discretion in looking at all that totality of circumstances to actually determine what that sentence should be. Mandatory minimum sentence set that floor, so there is that discretion and that judgment that is being removed, certainly from the prosecutor and the judge, at least to some degree. So from a kind of prosecutor and discretion-wise, they're the ones who know the case the best. They're the people on the ground. So removing that knowledge and that judgment, there is some tension with that. So, and then third, you talked about cost. There may likely be some additional jail costs associated with mandatory minimum sentences. We talked about doing a sample data of from December of 2024. The sentence for 2 or more prior offenses were sometime between 18 and 32 days in jail. So if you average a 30 days minimum sentence for those individuals, there could be some additional jail cost. Courtney also had talked about the sort of indirect cost with somebody in custody not being able to work, not being able to take care of their families, not being able to take care of other obligations. There are some indirect costs there. But then there are also the potential that mandatory minimum sentence could work as an enhanced deterrence. You could see lower crimes, the reduction of these crimes. And while the short term may increase those costs, in the long term, maybe there would be a decrease in those costs. So that's the part that's really hard to quantify in terms of the effectiveness of a mandatory minimum sentence. Kind of back to my first point, because it is part of that larger, complicated ecosystem of our criminal justice and social justice.
Thank you. I did not ask about the cost. Thank you for explaining. I asked about the strain or court resources leading the backlogs. I think looking at the cost of the jail by itself and some indirect costs is not the part of the equation. As Councilmember Neuenhaus said, there are a lot of other cost saving that we cannot count. Thank you for that. Do you have any comment on this can strain our court resources and potentially leading to case backlogs?
I don't see a direct indication that it would put a particular strain on the court system. We would still be prosecuting these cases, our prosecutor in any case. It wouldn't change that just because there was an associated potential for a mandatory minimum sentence. The community court will be run by county standards, as is being done in many cities across the county and across the state. And so their resources will be finite, but that is something we understand as we contract and move through that process. So any folks who would be funneled into the community court as a resource won't change the resources already established. And once someone is incarcerated, once they're assigned a jail sentence, that pretty much stops the impact on the court. It's not going to, I don't anticipate there would be any major change in the number of arrests or referred crimes. And while I have the microphone, just to clarify on slide 6, I think that's caused us some consternation. That data is federal, what's called NIBRS data, and so I just want to clarify, in case it appears that our police are not doing an excellent job, which they are, this is calls for service data. And calls for service differs extensively from the number of contacts and, more importantly, arrests and then charges. It's essentially a funnel system. As you might imagine, many calls come for service into our 911 system, and they are not anything that, even with the best investigation and immediate response, we would ever be able to build probable cause. So that's why that number seems so large. There are also other factors. A call may come in to Bellevue that there's been a theft, but Bellevue PD may not be the intercepting agency that makes the arrest or completes an investigation. Those numbers would then not have appeared on the second. So if that gives you some better feeling about that huge number on slide 6, how it doesn't correlate to the charges. That's just a moment that we had some discrepancy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks for all the thorough analysis. Also want to join in thanking Councilmember Neuenhaus for bringing this forward. We all agreed that there was a need to look more closely for ways to reduce so-called public disorder crimes in the city, and I'm glad we've done so. I appreciate that we have the chance to learn from your findings and decide what steps, if any, we should take in creating a tool for the city attorney's office to use in reducing the number of these crimes. I'm certainly in favor of providing the city attorney's office with the tools they need and want to effectively keep our community safe. And while this is a council-initiated effort, I hope that you will let us know whenever you conclude that there is a tool that you need or other support that we can provide. I think we all want to ensure that you have all the tools you need. I'm also encouraged to see that the city's prosecutors are charging 88% of the misdemeanor cases that are referred to them and successfully prosecuting 94% of those. I want to commend you and your staff for being so effective. These are the kinds of numbers that anyone should be proud of to achieve in any field. I think your office is so effective that I am concerned that instituting a mandatory minimum sentence would be viewed as a no confidence vote, which is not a message that I want to send to you and your team. I think that the discretion that you and your team exercise is completely appropriate. In fact, we expect you to use your discretion. I don't believe that the way in which your team is exercising its discretion is contributing to an increase in so-called public disorder crimes. As such, I don't believe that we need to curtail your approach. I think we need to support it. As I understand it, our prosecutors get the sentences that they request from judges. The three third-time defendants that were convicted and sentenced just this last December received sentences of 20-plus days in jail which is exactly what this public disorder ordinance aims to accomplish. You effectively prosecuted the criminals, asked for a lengthy jail sentence, and got it. And even though 100% of the criminals sentenced last December received the same sentence they would under the new ordinance, that doesn't mean that future prosecutions under different circumstances should be handled in the same way. That is where your professional judgment, your discretion, comes into play. I do not think that we should substitute our opinions for your professional judgment. It's a critical part of your job, and I think that you're doing it well. I think if we're so unhappy with our prosecutors' performance, then we should seek their replacement. Otherwise, we leave them to go about their business. And I, for one, think they're doing great. And we're already seeing the results we want. I like the integrated approach that we take here in Bellevue. Our police officers aggressively and successfully enforce our laws. We prosecute our own misdemeanor defendants, and we run our own probation department. As a council liaison to the Probation Advisory Board, I see firsthand how BPD, our prosecutors, public defenders, probation department, and court system work together to ensure the best possible outcomes for our community. Our current approach achieves the best possible outcomes. It doesn't eliminate crime, it reduces it to the lowest level. I have a few questions for you if I could. Would organized retail theft be covered under this public disorder ordinance?
It would not. That is a felony crime that would be prosecuted by the King County Prosecutor's Office. As we saw in our Stop the Lift campaign, some of those folks who are engaged in similar behavior are captured in our theft 3 arrests, but the crime itself is a felony.
Okay. And just, I know that we've talked a little bit about community court. I'm just wondering if we can expect the first time and possibly second time offenders would, in your opinion, would be less likely to reoffend or become third time offenders?
I think that is the hope. Community court is not for everyone. Not everyone is eligible or interested, but it seeks to identify those who are amenable to treatment or to addressing other areas of their life which are contributing to criminal acts. And so the idea would be that if we provide support services and strong probation, we should be helping those folks break the cycle of committing crimes.
Okay, and in thinking about that, do you have an opinion as to which approach or deterrence tool you believe, in your professional opinion, will most effectively reduce recidivism for shoplifting and car prowling, community court, or a 30-day jail sentence?
I would say that they are neither one would be preferential. I think they are both tools in a toolbox, which is the best approach to criminal justice. It's just a decision. I think especially where we focus an ordinance that also retains the discretion that it appears council is willing and able to give to our prosecutorial team.
Is there another deterrence tool that we don't currently use that could be helpful?
I think we have used the organized retail theft emphasis patrols at the police department, and I would ask that those efforts continue to be supported, whether that's funding. I think that's an area where we are seeing a tremendous impact, ability to connect directly with shop holders, with visitors who are coming here to shop and seeing that publicly. So that's an area I would ask for additional support.
And if this ordinance was to pass, would a judge be required to sentence an offender to 30 days in jail? Or is this a requirement for the prosecutor to request and not necessarily for the judge to grant?
The prosecutor would need to give notice to any offender who would be subject to this mandatory sentence. And then under the way we would have it structured, it should be compatible with state law, which shouldn't preempt any issues, which is similar to how both Marysville and Everett have done that. And the judges should be comfortable because they are contracted to run Bellevue Court according to Bellevue laws.
Okay. Okay, yeah, great, thank you. So the bottom line for me is that prosecutorial discretion is critically important to maintain. I think that our prosecutors are using it effectively. A public disorder ordinance would be a vote of no confidence in our prosecutors, and I don't agree with that message. A mandatory minimum sentence would not, in fact, be another tool. It would eliminate all of the currently available and effective tools and replace them with just one, which is jail. 100% of the cases from last December that would fall under the proposed ordinance received the same jail time that the ordinance would mandate. It seeks to fix a problem that doesn't exist. A public disorder ordinance would disrupt the current integrated approach to public safety that synchronizes the efforts of our police officers, prosecutors, probation officers, and judges. We all live here. We all want to be safe in our parks, our neighborhoods, our businesses. Public safety is a top priority. I agree with the thrust of this effort. I don't think tying the hands of our professionals in this way achieves that. So for me, this is not an ordinance that I could support. I appreciate the presentation and all the information. Thank you.
Okay. So we've heard a lot from everybody. Would you make a motion?
Certainly. Can I make one clarifying point, though, before I do?
Yeah.
I just want to clarify, because I feel like it's, sorry. I feel like some, because no one has stated it, no one believes it, this straw man argument that somehow this is about a no confidence vote or unhappy with the prosecutor's performance. No one has stated that. No one believes that. I don't know where this comes into part of this conversation. So I just feel like that's a very unfair categorization of this process and the intent of this ordinance, because again, no one believes that.
Well, I think it's an opinion.
It's an opinion, absolutely.
And I think it's a fair
Absolutely.
opinion. So
So-
do you want to defend yourself?
Yeah, I might just share that this is a tool that has not been requested by the prosecutor, so it's not one they think they need. It's one that we are imposing on them. And if we're not happy with the results, then of course we would do something like this. So it does seem clear to me that whether or not that is the intended message, it's certainly implied.
Okay.
Again, another opinion. So with that, I will move to direct staff to bring back an ordinance in 6 months with more data, including from other cities, the cities of Everett and Marysville, which have passed similar ordinances that have implemented a similar ordinance, and additional new info on the community court.
Sorry.
Second.
All right, we have a second. Jeez. Deputy Mayor did. So you heard the motion. It's been seconded. Did you need to say something, Councilmember Lee? Or can we vote?
I was
Okay.
going to say something. I feel that what the Councilmember Hamilton said is very, very well studied, and he has a lot of information, he has a lot of rationale, and I tend to agree that maybe the statement, the opinion about Councilmember Newhouse may be a little bit harsh, but it makes sense in some way because it does do a lot of explanation. We are no expert of every facet of the for safety, policing, sentencing system. We haven't heard the police officer or department or the like our staff mentioned. Our lawyers. There's a lot of other innuendo, a lot of other facets of how to make the city safer, and I understand that. So this is just one piece of it. It's not the whole thing. So I would agree that what Councilmember Hamilton said is really good. I would like to support, and also, however, Councilmember Newhouse's suggestion is also valid because it's just one piece of it. But I would like to suggest whatever Councilmember David Hamilton suggested should also be considered. I would like to suggest have this whole thing that Councilmember Hamilton suggested to be studied by our attorney, by our police department, but just in the overall safety consideration, so that we have a much better understanding, more complete analysis and resolution of this whole issue, so that we are all happy and satisfied that what is the right thing to do.
Okay,
Without
let me,
feeling that we are
let me stop
acting
everybody here
too
for a
hard.
minute.
Okay.
The intent of the motion is to bring it back with more data to then consider whether to move it forward. And if there's more data that you want to have that has not already been listed, can you tell us what it is?
No, my only question was just to rehear the motion. So if it's coming back, we're gonna do some more work, come back in 6 months, take another look, that's all I wanted to know.
That is what the motion, that is the intent of the motion.
And align with the timing of the community court?
It opens in July, so it gives it a little more time.
Yeah, second.
Oh, it's been seconded, okay. And with that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good, thank you. Well, that was an action-packed meeting. In the packet, there's an overview of Visit Bellevue's 2024 Destination Development Plan, which I encourage you to read because it's very well written and it's great information. And with that, we are adjourned.